this year. You're close in age to me. In your lifetime, has there been a bigger victory for Michigan? I understand they haven't won the national title yet, but I do think that this win is emblematic of what this program has been building towards. Is this the biggest win, you would say, in probably the last couple of decades?
I mean, the only thing that I think could even compete with it is just what the 2021 victory over Ohio State meant in the Big House for the first time in like 2 decades. I mean, that one, you want to talk about emblematic, that one's up there, but it's a different standard, man. When you're playing in a college football playoff, when you're playing for a national title, I mean, that's almost in a league of its own. You certainly can't compete with it. And man, I mean, you're playing the best the SEC has to offer for so many reasons. This game was the perfect challenge. You know, when has Michigan beat the best the SEC has to offer? It's been a while. Michigan hasn't won a college football playoff under Coach Harbaugh, has struggled in the postseason going back. The last bowl game before this was my junior year. Back in 2015, the last bowl victory. So this one is in a league of its own. Next week will probably eclipse that if Michigan can handle business. It definitely will eclipse it.
No, I mean, if Michigan handles business next week, that's certainly going to be one of the biggest victories probably in the history of that program. And we'll talk about some of the legendary players that can be made if they walk away with the victory there. I know the legacies are already being cemented after this Rose Bowl victory, but I want to move over to the offense. And when we were getting ready for this game, we had talked a lot about the Michigan offense and things that needed to occur. And some of the conversation was about things they did not do late in the year when J.J. McCarthy was banged up and the offense kind of took a little bit of a step back. But you and I also both realized some things that they always did that we thought were going to be a big shift in this game, something that could be a huge impact. I think from the beginning of the football game, Michigan used formations, personnel, shifts, motions to confuse the Alabama defense. And we talked about how much a Nick Saban defense needs to communicate in order to be successful. And they could not come up with answers defensively for what Michigan had to offer. So just starting off with the overarching offensive game plan from that standpoint, could it have been any better for Michigan with what they came out with?
I said, dude, I think that was Sharon Moore's best game. I mean, seriously, that was his best game. I think about that drive. You know, you want to talk about the start of the game, the rocky start. I mean, I thought that was an interception on the first play of the game. I couldn't believe my eyes. And then it wasn't. So then they punt the ball. The defense stands strong, and Samaj Morgan muffs a punt. Bama scores, and it's up 7-0. And it's like, man, we knew Michigan had to start fast, and here they are down 7-0. You don't want to gift a team like Alabama 7 points, and they needed to respond. And Sharon Moore called one of the cleanest drives I've seen to march Michigan right down the field and ended a touchdown to tie the game early. And then he continued that throughout the broadcast. Talent is like the minimum thing. Like you have to have a certain amount of talent, but my goodness, coaching matters. And it's like, can you take 11 guys and get them to unify as one unit? Can you play the mental game where you take a tough Alabama defense? They're littered with talent. And can you get them thinking and processing and questioning their eyes because of all your pre-snap window dressing shifts and motions? That's how you get an advantage on your side. And then the players were so ready as soon as Alabama was thinking up front, the offensive line, the receivers, as if they hesitated even for a second, Michigan was ready. They did not waste a moment. And it's just a credit, man, for all. We knew Michigan had to play their best game. Special teams certainly fell short of that standard. But offensively, man, this was definitely one of their best games they played considering the challenge all season.
Yeah, I'm totally there with you. And you and I always have this conversation, too, and I think this is a great time to make this point. I'm a big believer that third downs are overrated in terms of stats for the game of football. Neither one of these teams were particularly great on third downs in this game. But you know where Michigan was great? It was on the fourth downs on offense, dialing up the fourth down plays to extend the drives. And that goes back to why I think third downs can be a little bit overrated. When they needed to get the plays, when they needed to extend drives, in the fourth down at the end of the game, you're on your own 30-yard line. You put the ball in the air to a guy who didn't catch it a ton out of the backfield this year in Blake Corum, and he takes it for an explosive. Those are the moments, and that's what they did. They did it against Ohio State. We saw that, but this is a team that capitalized on those moments.
JP, you are spot on, man. And it leads to an even further point about the progression of Sharon Moore. Started as a tight end coach, became like the co-OC 3 years ago, the leading OC last year, the full-time OC this year. So he told us in the post game that, like, ahead of it, Jim Harbaugh said, hey, we got 2 downs here. You're going to go for it. They went for 4th down on a number of occasions. And he said each time he knew Jim was going to let him go for it on 4th down. And he said each time he had a play ready. And that's what you notice, that 4th down to extend the drive on the final play. One thing I realized, that did not feel like a 4th down. Like, it didn't feel like a gravitational moment. They just got in the huddle, broke the huddle, lined up, ran a play, easy completion, moved the chains. And it's like that to me is the sign and a perfect example of the changing perception of Michigan's program. Like, that is a clear indication of progress for the Wolverines.
All right, let's talk about this offensive line for Michigan, because it was one of the question marks we had coming in. Obviously, the injuries, they'd given up some pressures late in the year. You know, we knew it was a good group, maybe not as good as the last 2 offensive lines that they had. Quite frankly, I think that they dominated the line of scrimmage on either side, but offensively, again, I think it goes back to the way that they created plays and they were able to mask maybe some of the pimples that they had up front. But they also knew what the assignment was and who they had to eliminate, and that was Dallas Turner, who's one of the best players in the country. And he had a couple plays, but largely was a non-factor in that football game in terms of being disruptive and creating TFLs and creating sacks. What do you say about the performance of the Michigan offensive line in this game?
2 things. First off, Trente Jones is a guy that has stepped up big time. Gets, you know, when Zach Zinner goes down, they move Barnhart as a tackle inside to guard, and Trente Jones, who's a guy that completely selfless all year, man. He was the extra tight end. He'd play. He was this first guy off the bench, the 6'0 lineman. He comes in and maybe he might have had the best game of anybody yesterday. Phenomenal job out there at tackle. But then I also go back to the play calling. I just want our viewers to put yourself in the shoes of a Dallas Turner, an elite pass rusher, and then put yourself in the shoes of Michigan's offense and all the pre-snap motion. And as an elite pass rusher, I like space. I don't want to be chipped and touched. So a couple times he's lining up on the edge and there's no one outside of him, and he's thinking, man, I got a clean rush here. This is great. And then the shift happens and they get into a bunch formation. And mentally he's thinking, oh, I'm going to get chipped. So he's prepared there. And then sometimes they chip them, sometimes they pull away. They're completely getting an elite player thinking in his own head and on his heels. So it's the performance of the O-line, but it's also the scheme and execution by Sharon Moore.
Yeah, I think Michigan, ultimately, they own the thought process, they own the tempo, they own the variety of the game, and that's exactly what we got. Based off of the way that they came out from a game plan, but in terms of trying to eliminate the best pass rusher on the field, they did that as well. But